Woo, woo, woo. Hello. We are back again for another Wednesday live stream. And as you can see, I'm joined by Kevin Powell. Yay. Where's the applause sound? It's on the other page. I'll do this instead. The real applause. Yes, Kevin has come to talk about all the wonderful new features which have recently been released in CSS. Very exciting. Yeah, thanks for coming, Kevin.
Yeah, of course. I'm always excited by CSS, but with all the new stuff that's come and is coming on the way, I'm always happy to talk about it.
Yeah, I can't wait. Now, Kevin, last week you gave us a challenge for the weekly web dev challenge, and it was to clone a course card.
Yes.
And some of the stretch goals were to use some of these features, but that wasn't mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought we can kick off by having a look at some of the solutions. And as usual, people have been extremely creative.
Awesome.
But first, I must say hello to everyone in the chat. So many of you from all around the world. I'd love to say all your names, but if I say one, I feel like I have to read them all. So I won't. Just know that I say hello. Okay, so before we start, Kevin, if I have a look at Scrimba, browse courses, what did you think about cloning this card? Were there any obvious pitfalls you saw, or opportunities maybe to use the new CSS features?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, in a sense, it's a simple card, which is nice that, when you first look at it, you think there's nothing that's going to sort of jumping out at you. And it's one of those things, just with the way the text is even laid out, like you have those 2 lines of text on the left with the image on the right. So it's just like getting those to be there. You have that big space with like the intermediate beginner coming on the other side. So for things like that, it's sort of it looks really simple, but then it's like, well, how do you organize it? Do you use Flexbox for each sort of section? Do you use Grid to do it? So there's sort of different opportunities there.
Yeah.
And then especially when it came to the styling of certain things, so like the spacing on stuff, that's where I thought the logical properties could be fun to explore to space things out a little bit, especially with the padding and different things like that. We'd also talked about custom properties. So if you did one card, the custom properties might not have been as useful, but if anybody did multiple cards, I could see those being a bit more useful for those backgrounds and stuff like that.
Awesome. Yeah. So we'll hear more about those new features a bit later. Out of interest, would you use Grid? Would you use Flexbox for this if you were building this, Kevin?
Yeah, I think I've very recently sort of changed my mind a little bit on how I approach the two. So now looking at it, I would definitely use Grid to set that up.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's take a look at what people have created. So the first one is this from Emily, helpfully provided the original so we can compare. That's a nice little touch. And we've got these pulsing blobs and rotating pair.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It is, but it's not all. When you hover over the name, you get all the different colors.
Fancy.
Indeed. Yeah. Very cool. I wonder if I can quickly figure out how that's been done. Let's have a look at the HTML. Is it all separate spans or something?
Yeah, it must be spans on all of them. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Look at that. Amazing. Yes, very cool. Well done, Emily. Yeah. So the next one's from Suhadia, who has a little bit of a different take. This person has gone for a lovely cursive effect, which a lot of people don't like cursive, but I think it looks quite nice, actually. Yeah. And it rises and falls, I think. Or am I imagining that?
I like the subtle little animation that happened there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's nice when they're not over the top, just like in your face a little bit.
Yeah. Very classic.
Yeah.
And then we have one from Dave. Now, I like these changed color blobs. I actually think we should have this on Scrimba. I think that's very cool.
Yeah, that's really clever.
Yeah, and
6 on 5 stars, good ratings on there.
I wonder what would happen if we had ratings for the lessons on Scrimba. Yeah, 4,000 hours, Dave. Amazing stuff. Yeah. Ooh, now this one's exciting because in the tweet, this person, who is Harry, told me that React was their favorite course. And they've actually made this in React.
Nice.
Yeah, totally. And it's not just one.
That's
There's
cool.
a whole kind of carousel, really, of different cards.
Yeah, I really like that, just with the blobs in the background. Like, it's not each individual card. Like, it's the blobs are reorganizing as you go through. That's really slick. That's really nice.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Very nice. And a nice gradient background.
Yeah.
We all know I love a gradient background. So,
Looks great.
Awesome, Harry. Marius is next with a different take on the blobs. Decided to have stars and Pac-Man, which I'm kind of loving, actually, and this cool typewriter effect.
I just did a typewriter effect recently, but I'm guessing they use something a little bit different for this one, just because mine, you'd have to have a really set amount of text. So.
Oh, really? I did actually wonder when I saw this. Oh, I wonder if they used Kevin's tutorial for this. Yeah, super cool, Marius. I think we should have this typewriter effect on Scrimba as well. So lots of ideas for future updates.
Yeah.
This was, something really exciting from Amy. Dark mode for the cards. Can you imagine? Totally new Scrimba dark design. I really like it.
Yeah, it looks good in dark mode.
Yeah, it really does. It'd be cool to have them toggling on the Scrimba site.
Yeah.
Oh, so now we have, this one takes it to the next level because it's not just course cards, it's customizable course cards. So you can change the colors of the blobs, and then the course card. So that was the background blobs, and then you can also change the course card blobs.
Cool.
The shape, the color, maybe not that one, and then the shape on here. But it's also a useful tool for generating blobs, because under here you get the border radius, which you can copy and paste.
That's really cool. That's such a great way to, you're learning so much by building something like that. That's really awesome.
Yeah, it is. Also, my cat Pumpkin has launched a course on Scrimba.
Nice.
Coding for cats. Yeah, I'd sign up. So, lovely. Well done, Ambreen. Next, we have Shash, who created this cool, subtle animation. Spelt your name right here, Kevin. And a sort of lava lamp effect in the background, which I find very relaxing.
Yeah.
Cool stuff. And finally, Serious Dave has created this
fancy
spinning effect and added a button where we can get started.
Very slick.
Yeah, awesome. So I think that's pretty cool. Well done to all of your amazing submissions.
Yeah, really good, everybody.
Yeah, totally cool. I'll now open the winner poll, so you can vote until the end of the stream. Here we go. Now, can you actually see that? Because it says that I've only posted it to Twitch, but I don't know how to post it everywhere else, which is a bit annoying. Hopefully Michael's there. Oh, it says he's there, so he can share it somewhere else in the main chat. Michael, please confirm. Yes. So let's talk CSS. Kevin, I'll probably hide this for now, but I can reshare if need be. So lots of new features we can touch on. We can start wherever you like, really. We've mentioned the color syntax. So do you want to run us through that?
Yeah, sure. So this is something that's part, they've recently sort of revamped the color syntax a little bit. And it's not just for, so we can use, and it's a little bit like with a lot of the old CSS stuff, you can always use the old one. They can't make the old one go away, because if they did that, it would break a lot of sites. So if you're comfortable with those ones, don't feel like, oh no, like I have a new, you're fine with those.
Cool.
But we have a whole bunch of new color modes that are coming to CSS, which is really exciting. So with RGB and HSL, like there's a limit to the colors they can produce.
Yeah.
So there's Safari right now is the only browser that's actually implemented it where there's this new wider color gamut that's available. So hopefully we start seeing it elsewhere, just because our devices now can actually produce these colors than we used to not be able to.
Wow.
So with these new color modes that are coming, they're not available yet. Or I think maybe Safari might be, because they just had the WWDC. So I think they just said that the new one might be supporting a couple of them. But with these new color modes, they're going to be using the new color syntax. So they've also made those available to us now. So I'll share my screen
Cool.
because I think it'd be the easiest way. And it's not a really big difference. It's actually a pretty small difference, but I think it's a lot more user-friendly. So I'm looking forward to it. So there we go.
Okay.
Perfect. So yeah, with the old color, say you did, I'll just do body, just so we have a selector. And you did your color. And so it used to be you'd have your RGB, and then you had either RGB or RGBA, and you would come in and, whoops, I lost my mouse there. You'd say come in 255, 0, 0, oops, 0, 0, and then your alpha value. One thing that was interesting with this is that you can actually omit the A and it's still going to work. So even if you just write it like that. But the new color syntax gets rid of the commas. And commas with CSS are always this weird thing because sometimes you need commas and sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
So they seem to finally have realized that, and they're narrowing down on trying to get some more consistency of when we use commas and when we don't within values. Because usually
really?
it seems, I mean, here we're throwing commas in, but it seems to be a lot of the time you'll have spaces for multi-value, but then anyway, so they're doing it for spaces now. So the new syntax would be a 0, 0, and then a / with the alpha value. And you can see it is actually working here. So I don't remember the browsers that are supporting it now, but I think support's actually pretty good for this as of right now. I'd have to double check, but it does work. I like it because it's just a little bit, less characters to write, and you're sort of highlighting that a little bit, and it works with HSL as well. So if you do, we talked last time I was on about why I like HSL more. So you can do the same things. If you need black, 0, 0%, 0%, and then over 0.25, let's say. And actually, let's do this at 50, this at 100. And the reason I like HSL is just because the values here, you have 150, you get your, actually, let's make this a bit, you just rotate through here on your colors. And once you start understanding the degrees here, it becomes a little bit easier. But yeah, that would be the new color syntax that they're making available to us.
Cool. Wow, that's exciting. Interesting question from Jose.
Yes.
Do you avoid cool CSS features when they leak full cross-browser support, or do you make the effort to create a polyfill? Yeah.
That's a good question. It depends on what it is. And I know if you go way back in the day, one of the things that browser support took a while to get to is even box shadows when box shadow first came out.
Oh, wow.
And so when you're thinking, if my box shadow doesn't work, does it matter? So new browsers get it, and if it doesn't work in an old browser, it's probably fine. You're not going to ruin the experience. It just doesn't look quite as nice. I'm trying to think of a more up-to-date example of the same thing, and it's not coming to mind right now, but there's a lot of examples of things like that where if it's just an aesthetic change that won't ruin the experience, then I'll just use them. And if the newer browsers support it, actually when I do it on my own personal site, I'm using the masonry layout, which is pretty much not supported anywhere. But as I get a grid layout, and if somebody's browser happens to support masonry, it looks nicer. So it's it's part of the progressive enhancement or progressive it's a progressive enhancement, or it's like a graceful failure type of thing.
Yeah.
If it was for something else, again, we have new color modes coming. So one of them, I forget, LCH, I think. Is it LCH? LHC? I forget what it is exactly. I wouldn't use that right now because it's only supported in Firefox. And if my colors don't work, that could be a big issue. Sorry, it's only supported, I think, in Safari. So that would be an issue. So there I just wouldn't bother using it. And I guess it depends. If it comes to creating a polyfill or using a polyfill, I would say it depends on how useful the feature would be and is it worth the time. There's a lot of things do have polyfills already, though. As soon as they come out, people seem to create polyfills for them pretty fast. So if it's something that could be really useful, it might be worth looking into.
Yeah, great answer. Thank you for that. Gabriel has a question. Are they going to change color to font color?
I don't think so. Well, no, I mean, color will never go away, just because, again, you can't change from what it used to be. Would they add a font color? I would sort of like it, but I've never heard anything in that realm yet, so I don't think it's coming.
We live in hope.
A bit of a shame, yeah.
Yeah, we really do. Bernard asks, at which point would you use either of the color modes? So I think that's RGB and HSL.
Yeah. I've started using HSL a lot more, just because a lot of the time what I'll do is I'll have, like, say here I had an HSL, or actually I usually do it for my custom properties. So you have your whole color theme. So if I had my color primary, I usually do numbering system, but let's just say we do base. And so I have an HSL that's, we'll do 250. 50%, 100, 50%, and then I could come in with a color primary light, and then I don't have to worry at all. Like if I wanted to make a lighter version of RGB, it's actually kind of hard. If I want a lighter version, I know it's the same hue, the same saturation, and then I can just make it lighter. So I can throw a 75 on there.
Yeah,
so
nice.
Let's just say we do background is var color primary base, and then if I change that to light, it should be a lighter version of it. There we go. And so a darker version would just be going with a smaller number there. So being able to come up with like a whole set of colors just by playing around with your lightness, for me, is amazing. I find it so useful.
Yeah, that is very nice.
So that's primarily why I've switched to using HSL now.
Yeah, lovely. Cool. Keep the questions coming for Kevin. Very interesting ones so far. Cool. Let's move on for now. Can you tell us a little bit about Chrome Canary, Kevin?
Yes,
apart from the fact it has a fabulous name.
Yeah. So Chrome Canary is the sort of cutting edge, and actually the browser that I'm sharing my screen with now is Firefox Nightly, which is the equivalent but for Firefox. And these are they're updated daily, so that's why it's nightly. It's every night, I guess it's updated. And then Chrome Canary, it's the idea of like the canary in the coal mine. So it's where they push the new things, and if something breaks and the browser can't work properly, it doesn't matter because it's only devs that are using it. So that that browser will die before. It's sort of the warning sign that no, don't keep pushing that or fix that bug before we push it through to the next level. So that's where cutting edge stuff is usually introduced. So if you're really the type of person, and this is for JavaScript as well and all of that. So if you like being on the cutting edge or trying out new things, a lot of the time you'll be using Chrome Canary or Firefox Nightly to be able to use all of them. So one of the ones, there's two features now that are in Chrome Canary, and they're only in Chrome Canary, and they're behind flags, so you do have to enable them. But one of them is container queries, and there was another one. There's the has pseudo class that just got pushed to Chrome Canary as well. So that's where, and there are things that are either in the spec, but they're not finished yet. So they're probably going to get a lot of changes to them. So because of that, they don't want to release it in a major browser and have developers actually start using it. It's more like it's in this other one that you have to install separately. So, and it will only work here if you enable the flag. So it's just to make sure that things don't accidentally leak into production. Yeah,
which is great. I have enabled it in the past. One of them, I can't remember what it was. Shall we have a look at how to do that?
Yeah.
I can't remember off the top of my head. I remember it's somewhere in here, I think.
If you go into the address bar, you can just do Chrome. I'm in the wrong browser, so I'm going to get it wrong. I always forget as well because I don't enable stuff very often. Chrome, Chrome : / and then flags.
Flags.
There you go. And then
warning, experimental features ahead. So here you go. If you wish to use any of these at your own risk,
yeah.
head to
you
link.
can look through the list that's there, or at the top there's a search bar. So if you know the one that you're looking for, you can just type in the search at the very top of the page and find what you're looking for. Yeah.
So you could search for what they call them, component.
Container queries. So
Yes,
if you're a container,
yeah.
There you go. I just saw it. Oh,
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, and if it says default, it depends on the some of them by default are on, and most of them are by default off though. So you'd have to click on the default and actually choose enabled to make sure that it's working. Yeah.
So that's how you do that. Yeah. Question here from Caffeinated Pixels. What will the colors look like on displays that don't support the new color formats?
That's a great question. I'm not sure yet. I haven't played around with them. I think right now, because you would have to use, I think it's LCH. I want to make sure that I'm LCH color mode. Is that a real color mode? HCL, I think maybe it is. Anyway, you'd have to use that new color mode. So if the browser doesn't support on display, okay, so it depends. So first you want to make sure that the browser supports it, or then you wouldn't be able to use that color. If it's out of gamut for the screen, so somebody's on a regular old computer screen that doesn't have it, I think it would just max out at whatever the closest is to that. So, right, even like if you're doing print work or something like that, you get the same type of thing where you go brighter than when it's there. The screen itself can't display this green, but it can display something, whatever's closest to that according to the screen. So it should work fine. Yeah. Should be
all right. Yeah. RA1 Games asks, what are the best frameworks for CSS to learn? Or no frameworks, maybe.
I'm definitely the no framework guy. So I think if you're comfortable with CSS and really understand it well from a fundamental point of view, you could pick up the frameworks pretty quickly. Just because you're not learning how they work, you're just learning. You're just learning classes for the most part and learning some of the little details here and there. So there's a learning curve to it. Bootstrap still seems crazy popular. So if you really want to learn something, that just based on how much it's used.
Yeah.
And Tailwind is the hot one these days. So those are the ones I hear the most about still.
Yeah. Which browser do you use? I think Firefox.
I use a mix. It depends. My day-to-day one is Chrome, but I always have Firefox open as well. When I'm doing development work, so like when I have VS Code open, like everything I have set up is automatic. When I do my live previews, it's always going to be in Firefox as the default browser, just because most of the work I do CSS, and Chrome's really improved their CSS dev tools lately, but I still prefer Firefox's. And I use Edge. Even Edge is so similar to Chrome but I'll still every now and then be in there. And I test in other things, but yeah, my day-to-day is still Chrome, but I use Firefox maybe 25% of the time. It just depends what window I have open too. So I'm a bit of a mess when it comes to all that stuff.
The more the merrier. Yeah. Gabriel says, can you briefly explain the flags again? I'm a bit confused. Basically, they are experimental features in Chrome.
Yeah, and it used to be that if you've been writing CSS for a while, or even if you're newer to it, I'm sure you've seen the prefixes. So it's like hyphen, moz, hyphen, and then the property. Or you'll get what's the WebKit, and like there's the different prefixes that we used to put before them. So it used to be, this is when CSS3 became a thing. All the browsers were sort of implementing it their own way, and it wasn't perfect. So instead of implementing it with the actual property, they would prefix it for WebKit or for Moz, or Opera had the O, or MS for Microsoft. And so all the browsers each had their own things. It was a bit of a nightmare, really. And then at one point they realized this doesn't work so well. So now instead of pushing them out early behind a prefix, they push them out early behind a flag. So that way people won't accidentally start, playing with it or realize it's not for production yet because it's still behind the flag. Work out all the bugs at that point, and then once it's ready for prime time, then they'll just push it regularly.
Interesting. Yeah. So no more annoying prefixes.
Yeah. There's still a few out there, but not as bad as it used to be.
No new ones, at least. Yeah. Cool. Can you tell us a little bit about the container queries that you mentioned earlier? Yeah.
So I won't share my screen just because it does take a little bit of setup to do it.
But you won't. Yeah.
No, yeah. But basically, we've been living with media queries forever
Yeah.
now, and media queries are super useful, obviously. But the issue with them is they look at the size of the screen. And especially in a web component world like we're living today, where you're styling components individually, or actually, you know what? Maybe I might have a finished example I can share. Let me just see if I'm in. But yeah, so the idea is that you can change the size. You can have, instead of looking at the size of the viewport, you're looking at the size of an actual component. So based on the size of that component, you can do exactly what you do in a media query. Right now, they're they're not even in the spec yet. They're in a proposal phase. So there was a few proposals that were made. And the one that's being implemented right now in Chrome Canary it was a proposal by Miriam Suzan, and it's gaining traction. There's a lot of movement behind it, but already it's like there's been changes that have been made since the initial proposal was made. So it's one of those things that if you want to play with it, just know that, things are quickly changing with it as they realize the problems and bugs and other stuff that can come up with it.
Yeah.
So, but I think I have an example here. It's just going to take me 1 second to open. Sorry, I wish I thought of opening it ahead
Cool.
of time.
Yeah. Looking forward to it.
I have too many things I've done. So, but the reason that I'm really excited for them. Oh, here we go. Awesome. So yeah, I'll share my screen again. It's in. I'm gonna share. The reason I think this is. I don't think they're gonna replace media queries, but I think they're gonna have a very big impact on them, or change in them. So this is in Chrome Canary now because you can only do it in Chrome Canary behind the flags. You have to go into the flags and enable it, like we saw Leanne do. And so here I have some cards set up. So I have a big card down here at the bottom, and I have some cards here. And I hope this is the finished version playing. Oh no, that's not the right one. Let me maybe this one will work. Sorry, but you know what? Might be Chrome flags. It is enabled. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. This is maybe a better example. I know why. It's because they changed how it works. Remember, I just said that they made a change. Layout size, and I think it's paint. Is it paint they added? Oh no. See, my examples that I built before don't work.
Just goes to show how quickly things are moving.
Oh, now my examples aren't going to work, so that's no fun.
No.
I'll stop sharing for a second. I'll see if I can find out what I'm missing from that, and maybe we could go back to it. But they're really exciting just in that, we can look at the size of an element and change the layout of it based on how much room it has. So those cards that I'd created, depending on where they live, you might have a different layout, and it's not looking at the viewport size or this browser screen size anymore. It's now looking at the size of that individual, like the space it has to live, which makes things, so, you make it work for where it is. It means you can plug and play so much easier, right? You can, if it's somewhere it's full width, it works. And then if it's somewhere that's in a little sidebar somewhere else on a different part of your site, it still works with the layout you want it to have.
That sounds super useful. Yeah. Another question from Caffeinated Pixels. Do you recommend using CSS Reset or Normalize?
Yeah, I do. Normalize, I think, is awesome. So there's Normalize and there's Sanitize. I think like the old school Reset by Eric Meyer right now is a little bit too much. Just that's my personal opinion. Some people love it. Some people just like doing the star selector and then margin 0, padding 0 border box or box sizing border box, and that's it. So it depends on how you want to work. Lately, I've been using a Reset by Andy Bell. If you look up Andy Bell CSS Reset, you'll find it. It's a lot less hands-on, so it does less than Normalize would. But I think, a lot of the time, the idea with Normalize is that it's just trying to get all the browsers to do things in a similar way, because there's inconsistencies between how browsers do certain things. So the idea with Normalize, as its name sort of says, it's just trying to normalize those inconsistencies between browsers. I think that's a nicer starting point than just stripping everything down to the ground. and starting over, but it depends on how you like to work. But I do think having some sort of basic reset is a good place to start for sure.
Yeah, thanks for the tip there. Amit asks, what is your favorite CSS feature? Wow, what a question.
Yeah, that's a big one. My favorite feature, I don't know. There's so much.
There is.
I think that I don't know. I'm a big layout guy, so I think just grid for me is a very big win. But I can't think. Yeah, I don't think I have. You can't do anything with just one thing. But just I guess the combination. I know for me the biggest game changer was probably Flexbox, just because when we went from float-based layouts to being able to use Flexbox, like that changed how we made websites and it changed what was possible. So I think that was probably the biggest game changer that's happened since I started writing CSS. And I do think container queries is probably that next big thing. That's going to change completely how we approach creating websites. And actually, I got my demo working, so I'll share my screen again, because it's a little hard to explain sometimes why they're so exciting. This is a really basic example. You can do a lot more with them than just this. But you'll see here, like this is the same in my markup. So in the HTML, all of these cards are the same. But you'll notice here, like they're one next to each other. I have a big one down here. It's next to each other, but these ones are stacked. And then as they run out of room, so it's not looking at the viewport, or it's not the best example because my sizes are set up bad, but you can see once they hit a certain breakpoint, these are now stacking, but this one is still going all the way across. And then as we eventually run out of room, the same thing happens there where this one ends up stacking. So, and I think my other example, now that I know how to fix it, might be better. So it does take a little bit of setup to actually get them working. And it does rely on this contain property, which is not unique to container queries, even though you might think they are based on the name. And as it stands now, this is when I first created these, you only needed these two. And as I said, it's changing. So the missing one was style. So you need to contain the layout, the inline size, and the style. And that just means, so here my cards are stacking on top of each other because they don't have much space. But then when they run out of room, now they can actually go next to one another. And then once again, as we shrink down, they run out of room and they stack the other way.
Wow.
It looks a lot like a media query. So it's right here. I can make that a bit bigger. It's just instead of at media, it's at container. And then you treat it just like you would a media query. It does take, again, a little bit more setup because the markup becomes slightly more complicated in your HTML. But so it will probably have an influence on how we write our HTML a little bit, depending on where you're going to be using them. But I think once they iron out all the things the bugs they're finding with it right now and the issues with it, it could be a really big game changer.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Do you have a recommendation for the best website to deep dive into CSS? And then Garrett has suggested, I like CSS tricks. I like CSS tricks.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm a big fan. I actually have an article coming out there tomorrow, so you can look out for that one.
Really? Oh, cool. Yeah, definitely will.
But I think CSS Tricks is a really good site. There's LogRocket. They have lots of good articles that come out there too. Smashing Magazine is really good as well. Those are probably my three go-tos. I find for me, it's, I guess, super nerdy. But I end up learning so much just from the MDM. Because whenever I'm trying to develop or like come up with a lesson, I want to make sure I understand it properly. So I'm reading the document, and I like the MDM because it's documentation, but it's a little less dry than like the actual documentation, right? But then what happens is I always end up in like rabbit holes. So like you see a link to something here, oh, I didn't hear of that before, and you click on it, and then you find out about a new property or a different way of doing something that you never would have thought of. So I end up that's where I end up learning so much from, and just ending up in these rabbit holes. But yeah, it's a little bit nerdy to be reading documentation. So if that's not your thing, stuff like CSS Tricks I think is perfect.
Yeah, cool. David asks, how do you test on multiple browsers at the same time?
You just have to have the browsers installed. There's depending on what type of like how you're working, if you're using a build of some sort, there's browser sync. And you can set up browser sync with lots of different if you're on npm scripts, if you're doing gulp, you're using webpack. I think a lot of the newer ones have it built in anyway. So it usually means that you can just open that up in like I could be running, including like a scroll sync. You could have it opened in 5 different windows all at the same time. I could have it open on my phone as long as it's on the local area network. So you have your laptop, your phone, just making sure that it's working across all your devices. Early on, I won't do that. Like I'll do it just in my development browser. I do as much as I can. And then once something's getting closer to being finished, then it's time to start looking and making sure it works in all the browsers.
Yes, lovely. Cool. So on the topic of what your favorite CSS property was, can you tell us the most obscure CSS property you know?
Yeah, I think obscure is a hard one, just because I think one of the ones maybe that's the most underused might be columns. Columns have been around forever, and it seems to be that their use cases aren't, like when you first see it, I find that like, oh, I could use that everywhere, and then you start using it and you're like, oh, it doesn't really work for this, Flexbox would be better, or stuff like that. So I understand why it's not used everywhere. But it is a really cool property that you can make responsive column systems with. I won't say column systems because it's a little bit funky in how it works, because it breaks content up across the columns. But you can make responsive columns without media queries. You just say like, I want my columns to be, I want 3 columns and I want them to be 300 pixels wide. And then if there's more space available, it'll let them grow. If it runs out of room, it'll go from 3 to 2 to 1. Like it just adapts on its own. It's a really cool property that whenever I talk about it, people are like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. So maybe that.
It's interesting. CSS column. Let's get the old. MDM.
Yeah.
So this one.
Yeah, exactly. So if you click like where it says 6rem auto, like it'd go, oh, it's probably overflowing. Or no, it won't even be overflowing potentially. Because the nice thing with it is if there's not enough room, it will automatically sort of adapt to what it has. It won't force things to happen. But it will take one paragraph and split it up across multiple columns. So, and there's a few weird properties with it as well. So like if you have, say, multiple cards that are all inside of there, it might break your card in the middle of a card. So you have half the card at the top of bottom of one column and then the next half at the top of the next. There are ways to prevent that, but it's one of it's annoying that it does that by default a little bit, but you can prevent it from happening if you need to.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Good tip. Yeah. Is there anything in CSS which you struggle with?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, what I'm most comfortable with is layout. When creating layouts, I'm very comfortable with. I feel like the more I do, the more comfortable I get with it, and so for that comes sort of responsiveness and comes typography, and that's sort of all linked together. So in that realm of things, I feel pretty good. If it comes to animations that are beyond the basic stuff, it's something I'm trying to get better at, but I'm still like, you see some of the animations and things that people make with CSS, and it's like, holy moly.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I'd love to be better with SVGs, but SVGs to me are like a black art or black magic. Like they're so amazing, and the connection and the stuff you can do combining CSS and again with animations and with custom properties, doing really amazing stuff. And I'm looking at it and I'm just like, I'm seeing the stuff people are doing, and it blows me away.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so that world of things for me is definitely not the easiest thing in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, no, SVGs are quite mind-boggling sometimes. Yeah. Michael Shields discovered the appearance property the other day. Really? Let's have a look at that. CSS appearance. Ooh, it's a real thing. It's used to display an element using a platform-native styling based on the user's operating system theme. Really? So what does that look like in real terms then?
I don't think I've ever used appearance.
Just I think it means it kind of changes like the buttons and search
yes,
fields.
That's right.
So they match
I've heard of it, but I haven't used it. Yeah, it's to match sort of styling for different things. But that is, styling forms is maybe another thing. You're talking about things that are hard. Styling form elements is a nightmare. once you go past the very basics. So some stuff you just can't do with just CSS, right? You need some JavaScript implementations. Like if you want a custom drop-down menu, it's just a pain. And there's reasons for it. They really wanted to stick as much as possible with like the systems UI, especially like calendar pickers and for other stuff like that. Like there's reasoning behind why they haven't really opened up the doors for styling it. But I think I heard somewhere that there's sort of chatter going on about them coming up with ways to make them stylable, but it might be a while down the road.
Oh, interesting. That'll be good.
I hope so.
Yeah. Gabriel asks, is there a series of steps you take to create a layout?
Yeah, so I'm always going to be starting first, before I even worry about layout, I'm worried about styling the content. So I'll start with the typography and all of that, just because it has an influence on the layout. Especially if you start using Flexbox, like the content has a big influence on the layout itself and how Flexbox handles things. So just getting that, I think, is the first step, is a nice, easy thing. And then it's about sort of bigger picture into smaller picture and making sure everything is doing, I don't want to make one thing have to do too much work. So I'll set like, I'll have a container class that's just holding my content in the middle of my page and making sure it doesn't get too wide. I don't want to set, and that makes it reusable. I can use it wherever I want. I know it's going to hold my content and that's it. And then I'll worry about like the pieces that are inside of there. So I'm not going to be trying to set a maximum width on every element that I'm doing that's part of a layout. I want to try and let that do the work. And then it's about narrowing in, or I guess it's about like analyzing the layout, looking at the layout to see how, what's happening, how do I want it to work, especially with responsive layout. It does take a little bit. Okay, what's it going to be at small screen sizes? What's it going to be at big? When is it going to change? Is there a middle? You want it to change twice, or can we get away with it only changing from small to big? So you do have to like think about it a little bit and look at it, and then just decide what the easiest way to do it is. I think as soon as you start getting really complex with the layout, or you have lots of pieces that you're trying to position within the layout, maybe there's a different way to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. There are some complicated layouts that just involve complexity, but a lot of the time there's like when people are really struggling and I'm looking, and it's part of it's just lack of experience. You just have to learn through practice and building stuff and then realizing you went down the wrong path and trying a different way. But if things are getting too complex, just to put the brakes on and maybe see like, well, what if I wrap this in a div just so I could position that whole section where I want it to instead of all these individual elements or something like that.
Yeah, lovely. Do you recommend a CSS preprocessor be used in a project?
I'm a really big fan of Sass, so I would recommend it if you're there in your learning or in your journey. If you feel like you need one, I think it's really useful. I use them on small projects and big projects just because I sort of have a boilerplate that I can use. They do take extra setup at the beginning. So if you're starting from scratch every time and setting it up and then coming in with all the little pieces that you're going to need to do, it could definitely feel like a big waste of time because you just spent 2 hours doing that when you could have been just writing your CSS. But if you have something that you can use as a starting template and then you just get into it and can work in the long run, project to project to project, you can work faster. But I do think that the bigger the size of the project, the more time you also save with them. So if it's a little personal project you're doing, maybe you don't need it. Whereas if it's this really big corporate site that has thousands of lines of code, that's where you really start seeing the benefits of it. But as I said, I use it all the time for everything I do nowadays.
Yeah. Gidget says, CSS Grid is so hard. I really need to work on that. Yeah, I agree with you there.
Yeah. One thing I've recently, I had somebody that was telling me that like people should start learning Grid earlier and not doing like the whole learn Flexbox first, Grid second. And I was always proposing that learn Flexbox first, then Grid, because I saw Flexbox as much easier to start with. But he was bugging me about it, and I said, can we start really simply with Grid, and is there a way to do it? And I'm starting to switch my mind on it a little bit. I'm starting to see the benefits of Grid, and there are ways you don't have to. And the problem with Grid is there's so many properties, and there's new values, and there's so many new things with it. But you don't need all of them out of the gate, and you can actually do some pretty simple stuff with just a few lines. and a few different properties. So I think just if you can really simplify it to do the simplest stuff at the beginning and then slowly add to it, don't try and learn it all at once, because it's definitely too much. It's a bit of an overload. Just focus on like the simple things that you need to learn.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. This is an interesting one. Do you write the entire HTML first and then the CSS, or break it down section by section?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have all the HTML done first. The reason for that is if you're breaking it down section by section, you're going to end up probably writing a lot more CSS than you need to, because there's so much of your CSS is probably reusable. And that's why I like doing like just my global styling first, all my typography and all of that. Even if it's just on element selectors, you take your section select, if you have sections on your site, take your section and just add padding top bottom, and all of the sections have it, instead of going on every section and they're probably all have the same padding, and putting it for each one of them. And so I like having all of it done, because then I'm not writing it section by section. I'm trying to find pieces that are the same throughout the entire site that are reusable. Just because then when you do start writing your CSS, it comes together super quickly. And this also makes it a lot more if you can do that. And it takes lots of practice to be able to break things down that way, but the more you do it, the better at it you get. And not only is it less CSS that you're writing, which is nice, but it's also a lot more maintainable, because then if you need to change something, you can change it throughout the entire page, or probably pages, much easier than if you really do this section, you write the CSS, that section, you write the CSS, that section, you write the CSS. Everything really lives in isolation in a really big way, usually from when I see people doing it that way. And so it just makes it so if there are changes to be made, then you're doing it once again section by section by section. So it becomes a little bit more work.
I think this might at least partially answer Dan Pitt's question. Is there a more efficient way to code CSS? Or is it okay if the CSS is lengthy? Because I get scared looking at the CSS I coded because it looks like such a behemoth. So what you're saying about reusability obviously will reduce the amount of code. But I do hear what Dan's saying. Sometimes when you style a button and it takes like 20 lines of code, you think, is there a better way of doing this? What do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, at one point the files do get long. It's one reason I like Sass. I find it's easier to be organized because I can break everything off into its own partial file instead of having that one giant file that you're looking at. Because it does, like, once you get past 1,000 lines, you're just like, am I doing this the right way? And then you have a new element you need to put in. You're like, where do I fit this into my organization and everything? So I can definitely see why. Like, I definitely agree. It can feel sometimes like you're doing too much. At the end of the day, if it gets the job done, it gets the job done. That's true. And I think that there's probably always a way to optimize things, but it depends too. Like, even for me, I don't like the background shorthand, even though I could do things with like 5 less lines of CSS when I'm setting a background image sometimes, just because the background shorthand is so specific in how you have to write it. So it's a little more fragile. So I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to write it the long way. I know I won't make a mistake, and that's fine with me, even if it means that rule could have had 10 lines instead of 20 lines. Then whatever. It's it's fine.
Yeah, I think the other thing to avoid is over optimization. So if you find yourself refactoring, but that refactoring actually takes 10 times longer than if you just didn't, is it worth it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole separate discussion. You briefly mentioned has, which is a feature which I think is in Chrome Canary. Can you tell us a bit about what it is, what it does, why we should be excited?
This is, along with container queries, this is probably what everybody has been pining for the last decade, which is it's as close to a parent selector as I think we're ever going to get.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it's basic. I haven't had a chance to play with it because I just found out it got into Chrome Canary yesterday, and I just haven't had time to play with it yet. And even last week, people were asking me about it. I'm like, oh, don't hold your breath. They've been trying to implement it for a while, and there was major performance issues with it. And I just said, and like people were like, do you think it's coming? I'm like, nah, don't even hold your breath. It's I wouldn't be surprised if we don't even get it within the next few years, and then 4 days later, Chrome Canary drops it. So I was like, oh, okay, that's nice. But basically, it's, I mean, I haven't used it, but it's to be able, so you could say, Here, let me share my screen. It's a lot easier, I think, and this won't work because I'm not, actually, I have to find, maybe I could try doing it in Chrome Canary and seeing if it works. But I've never, okay. I'm not, again, I haven't done a lot with it. Anyway, I'll share my screen and we'll see what happens. So I'll be learning along with you guys a little bit here. I'll just do this one. So
That's the wrong one. That's Michael. Oh. There we go.
Okay. So the idea with the has selector, if I get this right, is you could do something like, or here I have cards, and let's just see it. We'll see if it works. So let's go to my flags. Has? Can we do it? Has? Maybe I have to update it. Okay, it might not work. We'll see what happens. But I could do card has image. So if I'm doing this properly, and again, I'm not, I might not be getting it right, but if I did that properly, and then you could say background is red. And I don't think it's going to work now, no. So if this were working, or actually, maybe it would be like this, actually. Still not going to work. That's okay. The idea is that you could do something like this, or maybe it's... Anyway, I won't do too much, but it's going to look something like that. And it's basically saying you're looking if a card has an image inside of it. So, and this could be a specific class. So this could be like, I don't know, just whatever, example. So you're choosing your class of an example, and you're saying if the parent is the card, you're selecting the card. So you're not selecting the child anymore. You're actually selecting the parent in this example. And let's actually, that's the wrong one. Let's just see. MDM has selector. Because maybe I'm getting it a little wrong in how I'm explaining it, but pseudo class. A, yeah, so I was doing it right. So the A has an image inside of it, or H1, that's a little bit different. But yeah, so it's the idea that you could select a parent of a certain class. So if my card has this inside of it, I could style it in a different way. So I think this is as close, but it pretty much is a parent selector when you think about it, because I'm saying this example, I want to select its parent as long as the parent is card. So yeah, it's really, really exciting because there's not ton, I guess maybe also because I've been writing CSS for so long without a parent selector, I'm not always running into situations where I'm like, oh, I wish I had one, just because I try and avoid that, I guess, in a way. But I've definitely been there where I'm like, oh, I just wish I could select the parent of this based on the situation.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's a little bit like the idea with container queries where now, this card is not looking at the viewport, it's looking at the space it has available to it. So it's really context dependent. So it's the same thing with this. So if you made a component, you could style, like the card component, you could actually style it based on its children. So it's the same idea of having these reusable components, but you're able to style them more independently than we used to ever be able to before. So I think this is one of the ones where I can't think of any immediate examples off the top of my head, but once people start playing with this, I think it's going to open up a whole can of worms.
Loving it. Sounds very cool. Yeah. Florian Pop's here. He says, hello, everyone.
Hey, Florian.
Yeah. Florian Pop in the house. Yes. Oh, there was a question. Tom Chand, if you're working in React, do you use styled components, or do you prefer to stick to one style sheet for the whole app?
So I'll preface it saying I don't do a lot of work with React. I do think that I think styled components are completely fine. I 100% understand why they're so popular. I just think you want to be careful with them. So I think having a global style sheet is really, really useful. And then for individual components to style the things that are unique about it, using your styled components to add that, those finishing touches to it, for me is the way I see it working best. Just because, again, I'm really a vanilla everything guy, so I like just going old school and taking advantage of how CSS works with the cascade and everything. But if you're going to use styled components, just making sure that you're not completely abandoning the idea of CSS and inheritance and the cascade and all of that, because they are very useful still.
Yeah, right. And this is one. I've seen you use anchor tags to make buttons. I did this in a challenge recently, and then I had a panic in the shower when I thought about it afterwards. But anyway, this person's been doing the same ever since. I never thought why you use anchor tags over buttons. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so for me, it's if it the whole buttons compared to a link or an anchor tag is it bringing you somewhere else, or is it an interaction? So if I'm clicking in it and it's opening a modal, then I would use a button. And if I'm clicking it and it's bringing me to another page, then I would use an anchor. And a lot of the stuff that I do generally, and it's super, like, most common design pattern in the world is you land on a page, you have the bit of text, a big image, and then 2 or 3 buttons say, click here, read, find out more, or purchase. They're not buttons, they're bringing you to a purchase page, or they're bringing you to another section of the site, or whatever it is. So because they're bringing you somewhere, it's not really an interaction, you're not changing the state of something. That's when I would use an anchor tag. And in general, there is some people who don't like the idea of styling links like buttons because they're not buttons. But it's just such a common design pattern these days that I think that users don't think twice about it, really. And the only reason the reason I use an anchor to bring you somewhere and a button to do an interaction is just because that's what those elements are made for. So what they look like matters less than what their built-in functionality is.
Yeah, great answer. Gidget kind of sums up the whole conversation. If I can't use a property in all browsers, should I even use it? That's philosophical question.
Yeah. It depends what all browsers means too. Like, you're not going back as far as Internet Explorer 6 or anything, hopefully.
Yeah.
So
ignore those.
So I do think there should be a cutoff to like where, and it's partially dependent on your own metrics. You get a lot of people still worrying about Internet Explorer, but they never talk about Samsung browser, even though Samsung browser has more people who use it than Internet Explorer. So, don't look at just what the names that you recognize, look at what the actual users are. And look at, if you have an up and running site, look at the analytics for it to see who's visiting your site. I was looking at the analytics for my own site over the past 3 months, and I had 1 person who was on Internet Explorer. So So I'm just like, I don't really care about the, when it's 0.0001% of the people visiting. For me, I'm not going to take the time to even think about it. Whereas if you're working for a business that is, it's a lockdown, people have work laptops that are locked down, they can't update them. You might have 10 or 20% of people still on Internet Explorer just because they can't change it. And then you sort of have to support it.
I've worked in a place where we had to use IE. It was painful.
And I know people like complaining about Internet Explorer, but just realize these days, anyone who's using it, they're not doing it by choice. They're either really not tech savvy, they might be on a really old computer that just you can't update it. The old computers get just stuck at one point. So like, there's a reason they're using it, and it's not because they chose it. So if you do have a large amount of users that are using it, don't get mad at them. Maybe sympathize with them a little bit.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
But I do think I do think a really big part of it too should just be making sure that they're getting a usable experience. It doesn't have to be the same experience that everybody's having. I always thought it was really funny that people would want the site to look exactly the same across every browser.
Yeah.
When most people, like, I open the same website in every browser I can, but most people will only use that one browser they ever use, and they might visit the same website on their phone. But that means they're getting 2 different experiences. If it's on their phone, it's not going to look the same as if it's on their desktop computer. So they might get 2 different experiences. So like, how come one person is allowed to have 2 different experiences, but 2 different people have to have the exact same experience no matter what browser they're using?
Well, even if they did open it in a different browser on desktop and it was slightly different, it's got a different font or something.
Exactly. Are
they going to ring and complain about it? So someone might.
So if it means that they can't use the site, then that's a problem. So if it's a property that's just not supported, and then it's going to break the user experience, then don't use it. But if it's something that's just adding a nice little touch to your site, then go for it. And it's going to look better for some people and look slightly less better for other people. And I think that's perfectly fine.
I do too. Yeah. Jose says, we recently stopped supporting IE at his work. Best day of my life. I feel that pain. Yes. So we have about a minute left. So let's reveal
Yes.
the winner. I usually do a countdown, but I haven't left enough time. So yes, sorry about that. Ooh, the winner, it's a bit too small for me to see, is Blobbing with Scrimba. Woo, woo, woo. It was this one. That is Ambreen, who I think is on her about 20th weekly web dev challenge now, maybe more. Wow.
Nice.
Yes. So well done. Blobbing with Scrimba has won. Yeah. Ambreen, you know what to do. Contact me for your prizes. Wow, Kevin, an hour of CSS fun is now up. I have a few more things to tell people, but I've only booked you for an hour, so I'm going to let you go. But thank you very much for coming and chatting CSS with us all.
Thank you so much.
Lovely.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun. It went so quick. I'm like, holy crap, it's already been an hour. I can talk about CSS so much. It's so much fun. So thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Yeah, thanks very much for coming. And I'm sure we'll have you back in the future.
Definitely. Thanks everybody who was here. It was great chatting with you and seeing you all here.
Yeah. Cool. Yes, so that was Kevin. Lovely to talk CSS with him as usual. So what I want to tell you about is the new competition format, which I have revealed in the next challenge. This is the next challenge, by the way. It's a pricing component for a cat food subscription. So I'm getting slightly worried about my cat obsession, actually. But anyway, you have to wire it up so that you fulfill these objectives. The selected card should enlarge, up to you how much, and the price should change to this color, which is this yellow. And then the non-selected cards should reduce in opacity. And if you want a stretch goal, why not add a toggle to display monthly and annual prices? Yeah, so that's the task for next week. Looking forward for some cat food fun. There's the link. Anyway, what's going on with the competition? Well, firstly, the deadline will be on Mondays now, which will also mean that the new challenge will be released on Mondays. So you'll have a new week and a new challenge. You'll still enter by tweeting to me with this preloaded tweet. I say that in my sleep sometimes. Anyway, and then rather than me selecting a shortlist, which is quite stressful and obviously subjective, you will be able to vote for all of them. Well, you will be able to select from all of them and vote for one. How will this work? I have built this state-of-the-art site on which I will include screenshots of your submission and your name, Entrant McEntrant, if that's your name, you're already on here. And then I will open a vote. I will load the solutions a few times a week, maybe every day, maybe every other day, depends on my workload. And the voting will open at 1 p.m. on Mondays. And then, what am I doing? Scrimba YouTube. At 5 p.m. on Mondays, there will be the submissions show, where we will look at the submissions, as the name suggests, and announce the winners. It will be 30 minutes long. Yeah, so that's the plan. I hope you like it. Let me know what you think of it. Or if you think it's a terrible idea, let me know that too. I'm open to feedback. Yeah. Dave says, cats, more cats. Absolutely. Yeah. Obviously, if you're a dog person, you can make a dog food subscription, or a chameleon person, or yeah, anything you like. Oh, actually, I've just realized what I haven't done is talked about which teddy won. Oh, this one. Ah, that is sweet with its little bow. Nice. Have I missed anything? Events news. Yes, So the deadline, in case you forget, is on the events here, Mondays. And what have we got coming up? Tomorrow, weekly community meetup. And then on Friday, Michael and I will be coding the new challenge. That should be a laugh, as usual. And yeah, and then on Monday, we're over to the results show. And excitingly, next Wednesday, Florin Pop is joining us on this live stream to talk about how to make money in tech. Looking forward to hearing that. I have made a nice purple thumbnail for him because he's big into purple. So I hope he likes it. Yeah. So I reckon that's about it. Don't forget to enroll on the weekly web dev challenge if you haven't done it already. Tom Chan says, I think that's a cool idea. Good. Yes. I'm glad. Hopefully everyone thinks that. Oh, I didn't show you the spinny profile picture on the solution, didn't I? Which one is it? This one. Oh yeah, look at that guy. Mesmerizing. Very nice. So we just have to submit it through Twitter. Yeah, the submission's the same. And I will just collect them from Twitter and then put them on the site myself. So yeah, exactly the same. Okay, Michael's talking to himself in the internal chat, and I don't know why. Going to ignore it. Yep, Dave says it's a great idea, Leanne. That's what we like to hear. Lovely. Okay, well, thanks for coming. It was lovely to have you, as usual. And I'm looking forward to Friday. Michael now says, answer if it needs to be resubmitted via Twitter. It needs to be submitted via Twitter, yes. This is only for this challenge. So you don't have to resubmit the past ones. No, definitely not. Yeah. Can submissions be from Discord too? Yes. Yes, they can. I am still going to be monitoring the weekly challenge channel. So you can also do that, definitely. So that answers you, Jake Townsend. Let's get you, I don't know if you're already on our Discord server, but I will get you a invite. Invite people. Expires never. No limit. Generate new link. You can join our Discord server, and there's a dedicated channel where you can submit them. Jake says he's on it. Good news. Yes. Nice idea, Leanne. Sincerely, your entrant McEntrant. I'm glad you like it. Yeah, cool. Oh, no, yeah. Looks like Twitter is going to get banned in India. Oh, that's not good. But you can use Discord to submit. Yeah. Yes, Michael, thank you for reminding me. While you're here, please like the stream. Ooh, hit the wall. And subscribe. Absolutely. Yeah. Helps a ton to promote the channel. Yeah, it certainly does. Speaking of liking and subscribing, while I'm here, here's my channel. I have recently, because some people are asking how to deploy a website on Netlify. I have answered that right here in the channel. So it's really annoying how you can't get a sharing link without clicking into the video, because I don't want to do that, because then it looks like it messes with the metrics, basically. YouTube, if you're listening, can you make it easier? Anyway, there we go. How to deploy with Netlify is now live. And Michael's now posting Rick and Morty quotes in the internal chat, which is even more difficult to understand. Twitter is currently banned in Nigeria. Yeah, that's really bad. But come along to Discord instead and share your solutions. Okay, thank you for coming. I will stop babbling on now. It was great to see you, and I'll see you hopefully on Friday and next Monday for the results show. Yeah. See ya, everyone.